It is Market Monday. Each and every Monday, I go over the biggest risers and fallers in average draft position in the best ball markets. I'll discuss whether I'm buying or selling these players at their new prices and why. The idea is to get you up to speed very quickly on what's actually happening out there in drafts and how to adjust. As for playing best ball, I play most of my action on DraftKings. I personally think the format is the best out there for people like us who are really deep in the NFL and best ball streets. DraftKings has the $20 large field tournament with $2 million to first, as well as the smaller $555 buy-in with $1 million to first for my high stakes friends. If you have not yet played best ball on DraftKings, you really should take advantage of their offer. Draft one, get one free ticket in the $20 buy-in Best Ball Millionaire. Enter a lineup in the $15 million best ball contest for just $20, and you'll score another best ball ticket to play free. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited, one per customer. Enter the best ball $15 million headliner by 9/4/25 to get the one bonus entry. $20 entry fee required. Reward expires in 30 days. See terms at DraftKings.com/NFL-bestball. Sponsored by DK. All right. Going to start with the risers from the last 7 days. Please note that I covered the Quinshon Judkins, Najee Harris, Juwan Jennings situations on last week's Market Monday. Today, I want to start with Elijah Arroyo. Now, we don't have the data here yet as Noah Fant was just released on Sunday, but obviously Elijah Arroyo ADP is about to spike in a big way. Bit of a weird run out here. We were pretty confident that Noah Fant was going to get cut earlier this offseason, save Seattle a bunch of cap space. But then the team didn't really need cap space and it dragged on so long, I pretty much gave up on Noah Fant getting cut. But then on the eve of training camp, Seahawks finally decide to make the move. Let's start with what's left at tight end. Incumbent is AJ Barner, 2024 round 4 pick. Pure inline tight end to me. Guy ran a 4.84 at his pro day. I do not consider AJ Barner a real pass catcher, although he did earn 38 targets on 216 routes last season. Not the worst. The exciting part of this tight end room is Elijah Arroyo. Arroyo played the F spot, the move or detached tight end spot in college. Majority of his snaps at Miami last year were in the slot. Numbers weren't great playing with Cam Ward, 35 catches, 590 yards, 7 touchdowns, but he did lead all college tight ends in yards per catch. I tweeted about Arroyo back on May 22nd because this note from the ESPN Seahawks reporter caught my eye. And the note said, Arroyo's size, speed, and route running ability led new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak to wonder aloud during pre-draft meetings whether he could essentially take over as Seattle's X-receiver after DK Metcalf was traded to the Steelers this offseason. I don't think coach speak about rookie tight ends playing the X spot or playing the DK Metcalf role. I don't think that's something that we should take too seriously. But it's at least in Kubiak's mind and confirms that they see what everyone else sees. Arroyo is a pure pass catcher who happens to be playing the tight end position. Now, rookies who could struggle as a blocker, it's scary. They can quickly become zeros at tight end. But the Seahawks are pretty desperate here for targets. They have JSN in short area. They have Cooper Kupp, who the Rams were just in love with for many years and then just decided he's totally cooked. Then they have MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who has failed with plenty of good quarterbacks in his career. They have very little at wide receiver 4 and beyond. There's opportunity here for Arroyo. So I had taken him a couple times in round 20 on DraftKings already before this Noah Fant cut news. I would consider Arroyo in round 18 or so now if I already had 2 solid tight ends. I think Arroyo has a lower floor, but probably more upside than the Cade Otton, Pat Freiermuth, Jatavian Sanders types. I am just generally worried about Seahawks pass game in general, given Sam Darnold's pressure sensitivity, their offensive line woes. We're going to talk to Brandon Thorne more about that later this week on the show. My lean is Devontae Adams ahead of JSN in half PPR for sure. In full PPR, I've been taking Devontae Adams and JSN roughly equally. I will say this, though. If I'm wrong and Sam Darnold is actually good this year, and I do think Clint Kubiak is good enough to hide the offensive line woes, at least to some degree. If I'm wrong and Darnold's good, there is a ton of volume to be had. You don't remove DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Noah Fant from the same team. I mean, that's 246 targets last season. You don't remove them and not open up massive opportunity for the guys remaining. Second riser, Anthony Richardson, up 5.2 spots to 193 overall. This stems from an ESPN report last week, which said Anthony Richardson is believed to have recovered from his recent right shoulder setback as the team prepares for training camp. It's possible A-Rich is on a pitch count early in camp to allow kind of a ramp-up period, but it sounds like his problematic right shoulder, his throwing shoulder, is going to be fine for this camp competition. I think the most likely outcome right now is Daniel Jones wins the camp battle, starts week 1. And in that scenario, it all comes down to wins. If Danny Dimes can beat the Dolphins and the Broncos at home to start the season, not that crazy, he'll get a little bit longer leash. Then they play at Tennessee, at the Rams, home versus the Raiders, home versus Cardinals, at Chargers, home versus Titans. It's a pretty soft start to the schedule for the Colts. And if Dimes has that job in week 1, which I think he will, he could just hold on by winning games. Maybe they're 4-4 or 5-3. Again, you get more leash at that point. Now, of course, it's Daniel Jones, right? So if they instead start 1-3 or 2-5, which is certainly possible, that's when the Anthony Richardson door flies open. And we know anytime Anthony Richardson starts, he will project as a top 5 fantasy quarterback on the week. Last season, he went over 20 DraftKings points in 4 of the 10 games he finished. He averaged 16.9 DraftKings points per game in his starts overall. So the way I've played this is Colts QB is third QB only, and only when I have one of Pittman, Downs, or Tyler Warren, which is a decent amount. I like taking those guys where they go. So, and I also only do it when I have 2 solid quarterbacks already. Let's say I have Tua Tagovailoa and Matthew Stafford. Not that strong. In those, I'm trying to get something I can rely on a bit more at QB3, like a Bryce Young or Geno type. But if I have something like Patrick Mahomes and Drake May at quarterback, then tacking on Anthony Richardson at quarterback 3 at 193 overall, that's a risk I'm willing to take. Note that I wouldn't tack on the A-Rich QB3 play when I already have elite quarterback. In other words, if my quarterbacks are Lamar Jackson and Trevor Lawrence, I would just stop at 2 quarterbacks in most builds. Third riser, Quentin Johnston, up 2.9 spots to 147 overall. A bit of fallout here from the Big Mike Williams surprise retirement last week. I didn't really think Big Mike Williams was draftable. I didn't think he was going to have a big role, but he was still a threat to play that X spot and steal some jump ball / end zone targets. So I do think it matters. Now, do I think Quentin Johnston is good at the NFL level? No. Is it important to be good at the wide receiver position? Yes. Much more so than running back, where replacement level players can smash in fantasy, and even, quarterback, where bad quarterbacks who can run like A-Rich and Justin Fields, they can be fantasy stars. But at this cost here on Quentin Johnston, 147 overall, I'd call QJ the current favorite to play in 2 wide receiver sets to open the season opposite Ladd McConkey. And in 3 wide receiver sets, I'd expect Ladd McConkey in the slot, Trey Harris at X, Quentin Johnston at Z. Now, I know there's been some discussion from the coaches that Quentin Johnston would still play X and Trey Harris would play Z. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think Quentin Johnston can win much better than he can at X. So his role to start the season, I actually think is pretty strong. Playing in 2 wide receiver sets, playing in 3 wide receiver sets, playing the Z spot. And so how many wide receivers who went 55, 7, 11, 8 last season and have this pretty strong role attached to a very good quarterback like Justin Herbert, how many of them are available at 147 overall? Not many. If my wide receiver room needs some juice, I take stabs on QJ here. I currently have 8% Quentin Johnston at an average pick on DraftKings of 154.3. Let's get to this week's fallers. Going to hit 3 of them. First one is Rashee Rice, down 9.9 spots and falling fast here at 33.1. Actually, Rice continues to fall. Since we pulled this data, his ADP has sunk to 35.6. So it's happening very, very fast. We know a Rashee Rice suspension is coming after his plea deal last week. The question is merely how long will the suspension be? Note that we had a 2-game suspension for Rashee Rice baked in all offseason. We were trying to balance the chances he'd get the adjudication pushed back to 2026. Ended up wrong. I now think the most likely outcome is a 3 to 6 game suspension, with the most likely number being 4 games and Rice serving those games to start the season. First of all, and most importantly, missing weeks 1 through 4 is way different than missing weeks 11 through 14 before the bye weeks, before injuries hit. I can withstand having a player suspended for those weeks if the price is right. Second, I'm pretty confident Rashee Rice's knee is healthy. He's going to get to participate in all of camp and preseason games. I expect to get a good and healthy look at him. And so where would I take Rashee Rice now, knowing all this? I think around pick 50 on DraftKings. It's going to take a long time, though, for his ADP to get there because people are still auto-drafting. People are missing picks. Some people don't realize he's going to be suspended. In most drafts that I've done, Rice has still gone around that high 30s ADP, which is clearly wrong, and an edge for us. And the other thing about drafting off of why it's so much better to draft off rankings than some ADP or whatever people are doing is all the other Chiefs deserve a boost. We saw late last season, the Chiefs use Xavier Worthy in the short area role that Rice normally operates. Weeks 1 through 11, Xavier Worthy ADOT was 11.6 yards. Then they were like, man, let's see what Xavier Worthy can do underneath. Weeks 12 through Super Bowl, Xavier Worthy ADOT down at 6.8 yards. So by combining some of those easy screens, some of those easy drag routes with Worthy's deep ball ability, that's exciting to me. So Worthy around pick 40 on DraftKings, I think is pretty solid right now. Other one to note is Hollywood Brown. Small sample last year, as Brown was also hurt for most of the year, but on snaps where Rashee Rice was off the field and Patrick Mahomes was on, Marquise Brown posted a 26% targets per route run, sample of 108 routes, really strong. So I like Marquise Brown in the 140s ahead of Quentin Johnston, who I talked about earlier. Second faller, Trey Benson, down 2.9 spots to 151 overall. The pure handcuff play. I think the Cardinals plan to saddle up James Conner and ride him as hard as they possibly can once again. He's a hair expensive, I think, at 59 overall for a 30-year-old running back with nagging injury history on a meh team. So I only have 5% of Conner right now, but it's scary because if he sustains health, I don't think Benson will play very much, and I think Conner will pretty easily beat his ADP. Now, that leads me to the handcuff discussion. Last year, there was very little chaos at the running back position. Old running backs sustained health. NFL was extremely run heavy as a whole. It was an outlier relative to the last 5 to 7 years. And I do think there's some pendulum effect here, like I talked to Austin Eckler about. Defenses try to stop the pass. They play more cover 2. Safeties are deep. They put light defenders in the box. Offenses in those setups will be able to run more efficiently. So I've personally been hedging a little bit on DraftKings, where wide receiver and tight end score better. Most of my teams are betting on chaos at running back. I end up with plenty of Bishal Tootin, Rashad White, Tyler Algier, Dylan Sampson, Trey Benson, Isaac Guerrero. On Underdog, where it's more running back and quarterback scoring centric, I spend way more capital at running back. I take the Derrick Henrys and James Connors more. I'm willing to take a round 4 Kyren Williams or round 6 Joe Mixon. Anyway, anytime I'm evaluating a pure handcuff, I think of 3 things. Is there any standalone value? In Trey Benson's case, I don't really think so. Second question is, if the starter gets hurt, will the backup be a true workhorse? In Trey Benson's case, I think yes, for the most part, although Amari DiMercato is a threat on pass downs. And lastly, how good is the offensive environment that the handcuff would be stepping into? And that last question is key for me. I prefer Tyler Algier to Trey Benson. I just think the environment is better, and Algier can for sure go full workhorse. I prefer Rashad White to Trey Benson. I think Rashad White has far more standalone value, even if Bucky doesn't get hurt this season. I prefer Isaac Guerendo to Trey Benson in this Kyle Shanahan scheme. We've already seen Guerendo smashing it. The interesting handcuffs in this range, Ray Davis. If James Cook got hurt, Ty Johnson would still handle all the pass downs. So I don't love that Ray Davis one unless the James Cook holdout gets serious. But anyway, Benson and Davis are probably my least favorite of the pure handcuffs. I'll still take them if the others are gone, but I'm not going out of my way for it. All right, last one to hit on today. Keenan Allen down 2.7 spots to 200th overall. So it is July 21st. Still have heard almost nothing on potential 2025 homes for Keenan Allen or Amari Cooper. The price on these guys, certainly appealing. They're basically free. It's just not a play that I personally make. I took 0 Will Fuller when he was oddly unsigned that summer. I took 0 Leonard Fournette. I have 0 Keenan Allen or Amari Cooper so far. Can certainly burn me. I had 0 J.K. Dobbins before he signed with Denver a couple months ago. I know some people are going to get very good closing line value on J.K. Dobbins. I'm sure there's other guys I'm not thinking of who came off the street in the end of the summer and did well. But generally, my take is the parlay is just too rich or too much opportunity cost to risk the zeros. You need someone to want to sign these guys to their roster. You need them to want to play football. You need them to step in and play well. You need them to sustain health. I just typically would rather take a shot on a younger guy who could break out later in the year. On DraftKings, give me DJ Giddens or Trevor Etienne, A.D. Mitchell, De'Ami Brown. If I get burned by a 33-year-old Keenan Allen who always needed tons of volume to hit, he's not a yak guy. He's not a touchdown guy. So be it. Thanks to everyone for listening. We are starting to ramp up the shows and videos now. So if you have not subscribed to the Establish the Run podcast on audio or YouTube, be sure you are by searching for it anywhere podcasts are found. Also, be sure you're following me on Twitter for a ton more player takes at Adam Levitan. We'll be back later this week with Silva and Brandon Thorne to discuss offensive lines and their impact on fantasy for the 2025 season. Look for that on Wednesday. For producer Ryan, for the data side team helping me track these ADP moves, I'm Adam. Good luck, everybody.